Well, thank you guys for having me here this evening. First of all, this is a new presentation for us. We haven't done the value of volunteers in the past, and it was something that kind of interests me because I had the opportunity to work with lots and lots of volunteers. The count that I'm going with is around 15,000 volunteers in my career. So I started putting some numbers to some things, and we all know that we feel better and we get a good feeling and we meet great people and you do those things on a Saturday, but what is the value of that to the ecosystem? What's the value of that in really hard dollars to either the resource or the municipality we're working for or whatever it is? And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. The mission statement for Healthy Rivers Partnership is to connect people to their river and that river back to their communities. So in Kansas City, and you guys have all experienced this, we drive over that river. We drive over it all the time. Rarely do we stop to look over the edge of a bridge at what's beneath us. Rarely do we go down there and actually seek that out. So we want to try and provide people opportunities to do that. It's just basically a sneaky way to give people a stake in that river and in the environment in which they live. So that's kind of the premise of having healthy rivers. The talk tonight is the value of volunteers, and we kind of talked about the warm, snuggly feeling and all that good stuff, but there's some real value that isn't always something that we think about, and I'd like to focus on that a little bit tonight. I'm going to give you your remedial Missouri River lesson. It's the 15th longest river in the world, the third muddiest. It is 2,341 miles long. It actually flows north for a minute and then kicks back down to Kansas City, which is about here, where it kind of heads straight, almost straight east, where it meets the Mississippi at St. Louis. It's 529,350 square miles. I had to write that one down. It's a sixth of the United States, which is a lot, about 10 million people. 28 nationally recognized Indian tribes, 10,000 residents of 10 states and part of Canada. So it's a big watershed. And within that watershed, there are all of these smaller tributary streams that all feed into the Missouri. Right down here in Kansas City, it's too small to even see on the map. But the Blue River's down here, the Little Blue River's down here, the Fishing River's down here, all rivers that have really vital and engaged volunteer corps behind them. Some of the larger rivers are marked. You'll see the Kansas River right in here. So this is just a slide to kind of scare you a little and yet make you feel better. Here's Missouri, right? And so we have between 101 and 500 impaired streams on the national TMDL list, which is the list of impaired streams on the 404D list. So at a meeting, I spoke to a highly placed, this was a long time ago, I was very naive, and I talked to an official and I said, the Blue River's impaired and it's not listed. I work on the Blue River and it's a mess and it's got this and it's got that, and Don Wilkinson studied it and we know these things. And that official told me that all urban rivers are impaired. We don't have to single that one out. And that shocked me, because how do we throw funds behind that? How do we get a group of people behind something if you don't even call it a problem? So I thought that was kind of an interesting way. It was one of my first kind of forays into working with government on rivers. Sort of hand in hand with the valuation of what volunteers are giving back in dollars to these environmental type programs is the whole idea of a green workforce and having people turn those hobbies into jobs. And you say, how can that happen? I am living proof that it can happen. You're incredibly satisfied and very poor. But when you look at the workforce development, you're also kind of seeing how we look at getting volunteers. It'll say down here, prisoners, right? Isn't that the prisoner one? Well, how do prisoners become green workforce development? Well, talk about a captive audience. These people have to do service. I mean, it's part of their deal. It's part of the debt they repay to society. And so how do we bring those people in and have that be a contribution instead of a punishment? And so we start looking at things a little bit differently. But if you look, just look around it, and it's just everything that you would do to develop a workforce, you do to develop a volunteer. So this is why we do it. This is back in 1855, the Kansas City riverfront. So not only did you have the steamboat trade, but you also had the Native American trade that was still going on side by side. So over here, you might say this is, really up to date for 1855. It was cutting edge. And then here's the old times. And we look back at that, and that's just old and older. There are several people in the audience that can talk to this particular subset of people. So there are 8 authorized purposes on the Missouri, and we've talked about them before. I use this as a representation because this is our drinking water intake. This is the plant that brings your drinking water to you. So that's the Kansas City, Missouri drinking water plant. This happens to be an article fairly recently of the port being open. So navigation is one of the 8 authorized purposes. We're going to cut to this pretty slide because we don't generate power here, but power supply is an authorized purpose, as is water supply, as is water quality, recreation, and fish and wildlife. So all of those things have equal footing in how the river is managed, with the most attention paid to flood control. So something I know a lot about, and I'm looking at my captive audience, you guys know a lot about this, is the trash. And so we start to look at volunteers getting out and taking care of that trash, and how does that work? What kind of a value is that? And so we know that there's a value to you, because you go out and you have a good day, you meet nice people, you get to ride in a boat, get to go to a pretty spot on Blue River, you get to do something like that. But in those river cleanups, there are kind of different levels of those. You have ones where just smaller groups of people can participate. You have these other cleanups that are done roadside that really affect, I don't know if you can see this vegetation right here, but right behind it is cattails. They're right off of a little funky impoundment that goes directly to the Missouri, and all of this was pulled out of there. This was a cleanup on Blue River. We used canoes to get a lot of that stuff done on Blue River. They're actually pulling tires up. Do you see the tires? And then all these guys are pulling the tires up and out. Tires are gross. This is a big cleanup at Caw Point Park, the first cleanup on the Missouri we ever had here in Kansas City. We brought all of our trash to a barge for that particular cleanup. Then it's all pulled out of the river, just under people power, and then piled and disposed of properly at the end of the day. So we started looking at, okay, what's the value of all that? So we've done some things. I mean, we've made you feel good about yourselves, and you've had a connection to the place that you live, and you have a different connection to the river that sustains us, where you get your drinking water. But I started counting these things. And so in tipping fees alone, we have about $10,000. And this is just the cleanups that Vicki, have done in the last 17 years. And so in my time of being a volunteer, over $10,000 in tipping fees have not been charged to any entity because we took care of that with partnerships with different municipalities and businesses, landfills. That has all been taken care of. The trash that comes in on a river cleanup is kind of particular trash in that it isn't budgeted in any way. So a municipality has a budget for illegal dumping, and they use that budget to go clean up illegal dumps. This river trash, which generally comes in on a storm drain, is outside of the parameters of that kind of money. There is no revenue stream to pay for that trash removal. So we used to try really hard to get solid waste management district grants. Sounds like it'd be just a dead ringer for what we do. But they're diversion programs. We actually create trash that wasn't there before, that isn't captured anywhere else. So we do take care of that. We do get rid of tires. $6 a crack to get rid of a tire. When we get rid of 1,200 tires on a river cleanup, that is a substantial investment in our city. And it's an investment the city is well aware that we are providing. The value of volunteer time is $23 right now by the Federal Register. So $23 an hour for your time. The ecosystem benefits, there's an entire emerging new career path for folks just understanding what ecosystem benefits are. And I had these 5 really good slides that I'd gotten from websites all over the place, and they're gone. But that is an entire presentation in itself. How to actually put a value on a tree, to put a value on green space or ability to see the sky. But there are ways to value those things. And then obviously the aesthetics. Do you want to live in a pretty place? Do you want to live in an ugly place? It's pretty simple. So then it brings us to kind of the education stuff. And so we have things like this. We have things like the speaker series. And it's really hard to put a value on the education that we receive here. I just don't know how to value that. This happened to be done at the Healthy Rivers Warehouse. It was the only picture I had of you guys as a crowd. Getting people out on the water in boats, that's a huge education effort for us, something we're really happy to do and enjoy a lot doing. But what's the value of that hour to a student? It's kind of hard to say. The time that we spend studying the river, looking at what's out there, looking at how things are flowing, looking at where trash is catching, looking at how trash is affected by storm drains and boat ramps and all of those things as well. Getting out again on the river. This is our big boat. This is the Cypress, but it holds 18 people. And if we can put 18 people on it and take it out for the day, that is a good day. And so the value in that time is connected citizens and educated stakeholders. I looked all over the place. I did not lose this slide. I can't find a number for what an hour of educated citizenry is worth. But it seems to me that that's worth quite a bit if you're a municipality that cares about that sort of thing. In the, again, 17 or so years that I've been keeping track of how many volunteers I've been lucky enough to be around, it comes out to $1,035,000 in volunteer time. So that's $1 million. So I actually am a millionaire. I just didn't have any money for it. But those are big numbers. So then you get down to kind of the granular level. So how do we actually influence the environment that we're in? So we've educated ourselves about it. We've gone up and we've picked up trash and done those kinds of things. But now we're going to start actually working on the ecosystem itself. And how do volunteers affect those dollar figures as time goes by? And so this happens to be a group of kids who have just made wildflower seed balls. We do these at festivals all the time. Kids really like them. And then at the end of the day, we pitch them in the bushes wherever we're working, throw them in the wood sides because they're all full of wildflower seeds. And so we're seeding as we go. This happens to be on the Healthy Rivers roof. We have a sustainable roof garden that is planted with plants that are happy to grow in the kind of harsh conditions of the roof, but are also native based. So we have 2 specific gardens that are nothing but native plants, one that's nothing but native grasses. This year's Art and Science project is building a seating area on the roof that has a pollinator garden. And so we will be certified, by the time we're done, we'll be certified as a Monarch Way Station. So we're really excited about that. This is planting a rain garden at Lakeside Nature Center. So both these commercial rain gardens and the smaller ones that you would build in your home have huge amounts of value. And I am not the person to give a rain garden presentation, but they have numbers on what kind of runoff this saves, the kind of water quality benefits that it has. And then planting a tree. Simple thing like planting a tree. That's at Labonite Park. And actually some of those trees have made it. So I started looking for give us the dollars. How are we going to quantify this? And Heartland Tree Alliance had some really good work on street trees over the last several years. I live near Ward Parkway. Well, I live on the wrong side of Ward Parkway. But anyway, I live in Brookside. And they have the signs on the street trees. I don't know if you can see them, but they're everywhere. And this is a tiny little Olathe stick tree. I mean, it's a little tree. Our street trees are this big around. So if that tree's doing $9,000 of benefit a year, or I guess it's over its lifetime, trees can be really substantial benefits. They absorb a ton of carbon, both in carbon dioxide and then in the other carbons that are prevalent in the atmosphere. As much as a car driving 26,000 miles, it seems like a lot. A big mature tree can actually absorb a ton of carbon dioxide in a year. And then we get back into this valuation of ecosystem services. So the whole idea that we absolutely have to have air to breathe, and what is the value of that air to us? That is how ecosystem services are valued. And so it's a whole another level. I would really like somebody to do a presentation about that because I thought that was really great. So here we have water quality monitoring. This is using Big River protocols, and then this is just doing a kick net. This happens to be a DNet. But in the water quality monitoring arena, I want to illustrate this with a story. In 2002, I was working with a Hickman Mills teacher and his class. We were doing water quality monitoring. We told these kids to get out in the creek, and one young man did. Went back to his teacher and said he found this pipe, and the pipe had a hole in it, and the trees all around it had stuff in them, and there was water coming out of that hole, and he just didn't think that was right, and he told his teacher. So his teacher called me, and I'm always up for something like that. So I went out with this young man. He was a 8th grader. And he took me to a wastewater pipe that had broken in half. The stuff he was seeing in the trees were toilet paper and tampons that were just hanging like, I mean, like somebody had sprayed it on there like flocking. I mean, really bad. This was bad. And it had been going on a long time. Without that kid, probably still be going on. It is not something we have miles and miles and miles. How many miles of sewer do we have, Don? Bunch. Do you know? Many miles. See, he's a scientist, he knows that, many. Hundreds, thousands even. But you would never have gotten it checked that fast. So this kid, you know, pulled his little Aaron Brockovich and found it, told somebody. We went out and looked at it, called the city, and it made the paper. So how do you put a value on that? How do you put a value on citizen participation that calls in something seriously that's important, but how do you value that to this kid? I just think that's pretty amazing. And then it encourages that citizen science. One of the most exciting days of my life was when I was signed up as a citizen science person for the USGS, and I found out later that that honor was bestowed on me because I had to have a key to the car. I wasn't going to drive the car anywhere, but my stuff was in the car, so I had to have a key to the car, and in order to have the key to the car, I had to be affiliated with the GS, and in order to be affiliated, I was a volunteer for science. It encouraged me. Then we're going to talk about these festivals. And how do you value the participation in these kind of festivals? This was many, many years ago. That is Bob Steyert, before he retired from EPA, and a bunch of young Girl Scouts that had just earned their water drop patch. So this festival was a student festival in South Dakota that we were the keynote speaker for. We did a trash demonstration for them. If everybody is coming on May 7th to pour beer at On Tap Beer Festival, you'll be seeing these signs because clean water does make better beer. This happens to be Riverfest, and we bring our boat and have 8 different displays at Riverfest so that families have a little bit of something to do. And so each of you that gives your time on those days at Riverfest or on those days at any of these festivals, excuse me, provides that $23 an hour time, certainly. But what is the value of the education you provide working a stream table? There's not a number for the value of educating the public about something as important as water. It just doesn't exist. So then we get into the kind of crazy ways that you volunteer and ways that you participate. This is a friend of mine who will remain nameless, Stuart Caswell, who's right there. Here, can I shoot you with a... this was during pallid sturgeon broodstock sampling. And so Stuart took 4 hours out of his day and a sandwich and went out and sampled pallid sturgeon broodstock to bring into the broodstock program. So again, Stuart gave us $23 an hour volunteer time, but what is the value of a female pallid sturgeon that is going to help save her species? I just don't know how to put a value on that. What is the value to getting up close and personal with a fish to a student who's never seen one? You know, we take our kids fishing. Lots of people don't take our kids fishing. So what is the value of that? What is this value of having a party on a sandbar so big that you have to bring in 3 portable toilets? I mean, I think that there's that $23 an hour time, but what is the value? So this one I do have a value for. This is the Missouri River 340. This is the beginning of the race. It looks like it might even be the night before. But that is an absolute circus of people traveling across the state. 8 checkpoints between here and St. Louis, 340 miles on the river. We've talked about that before. And we have volunteers up and down that river. The city of St. Charles did a survey on the economic impact that the Missouri River 340 has to the city of St. Charles, and it was over $2 million. And that is taking out any of the volunteer time, that's not adding the time that anybody puts in there, the time that we put in on boats and others, on safety boats, working checkpoints, none of that. That is just the value of that traveling circus as it goes across the state and ends up in St. Charles. So maybe it's $2 million in St. Charles, and it might not be that in Waverly, Missouri. It's a smaller town. But those are substantial gains in tourism for these small towns. It is the biggest thing that happens to Waverly, Missouri all summer long. It really is. That's that crazy race. So I'm about to the end of this thing here. This is the slide I always stick in there when I want to think about something. I think that looks like thinking. But as you volunteer and as we become the people who are mentoring volunteers, I think it becomes incumbent upon us to make sure that people understand that the value is not just in the fact that you felt good doing it. That's not insignificant. But there is real value in the hour you spend at $23 an hour for valuation of volunteer time. But there's a ton of value in the services that you provide basically from the goodness of your heart and through a good program. So that's me, and that's Larry's phone number. I'm here to answer any questions you may have. I'd like to do a lot more with this presentation. So if there are folks that have some of the dollar values that I don't have, I'd love to see them. And we'll just make this presentation get better as it goes on. But with that, I'll take any questions, and I very much appreciate you guys' time tonight. Thanks for putting up with me on short notice.
Trash first round here anyway. I down to a lady and me and when I come home, I had a brand new plan. I bought sheep from Colombia and Mexico, and I went her up a holler down the Copperhead Road. Well, the DEA's got a chopper in the air, wake up straight like a black old man. I learned a couple things from old Charlie, don't you know? You better stay away from Copperhead Road.